about a month or so ago and let us know about some new federal grant requirements. And as part of those grant requirements, for the federal awards that we receive, we need to have certain items included within our policies and procedures to be in grant compliance. So for example, if we got a FEMA grant this year for, say, a major storm, when they come out and test that grant for next year, if these items are not in our policy, then we're automatically not in compliance. So in order to stay in compliance, we put them in.
Good idea.
Yeah, so hence the purchasing ordinance and the purchasing policy were the first up for review.
Were there any changes in here that weren't federally required?
Yes, so the thresholds.
Change that, right, from 75 to 10 or something?
So we did change some of the thresholds that were management recommendations. The one for the bid for the 10,000, that is federal compliance. And then you'll see in the purchasing policy that there's certain italicized notations where is a federal grant requirement. So for example, under the conflicts of interest, you'll see all the way at the bottom that there is absolutely no awards to anybody with a conflict of interest. And that's broken out simply because if we have somebody with a conflict of interest, it can be at management's discretion whether we choose to proceed or not.
Yep.
I had a couple of questions, but I think one of them just got answered. One of my questions was, is 7,500 high enough? Is that, would the Board of Selectmen like it to be higher, just for the, ability to accept a verbal or written quote with less than the whole RFP process? But if the federal requirement is 10,000.
That's not a federal requirement, that's actually one of the management ones.
Right.
So that actually can be increased if we so choose. So the thresholds where they came from here is back when I was in Mansfield, we had a complete overhaul of our policies and procedures, and Bloom Shapiro came in and they analyzed all of our thresholds. They actually went out to towns of the similar size and not audited, but took inventory of what their thresholds were. And those were the thresholds that became part of the policies and procedures. So I kept that consistency here since the population is relatively the same.
Okay. And just a suggestion, it's probably not that important for this, but is to index it so that you don't have to actually change the policy every time you want to change the thresholds. If you index it to, inflation, it'll go up naturally. And you can do it in increments so that, when you hit a $500 increment, you go ahead and change it.
Okay.
And that automatically happens as opposed to having to reopen the policy. Because that's how, policies sort of become really outdated because they're never indexed. I also wondered about, you do have a section in here that allows for emergencies to waive the procedures.
Yes.
But the definition of an emergency sounded like pretty serious emergency, like the general public is seriously threatened or a man-made disaster has occurred. And it seems to me there are probably times when there's just some urgency that, you can get a better price or you're trying to get in under the wire of a deadline or something.
So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I just want to give some flexibility so,
So
people
one
can do their
item
jobs.
that's actually not in here, that came up at one of the department head meetings last Friday, actually, which is why it's not in here yet, is adding a clause to give the finance director some discretion as to when it's appropriate to go out to bid, what constitutes an emergency, things of that nature. And the reason that this came up is, I guess there were a couple instances in the past where we've gone out to bid and our pricing has actually gone up. So I'll just give you a specific, that way it's just easier for me to tell the story. So one of the items was material crushing, and I guess we've had the same vendor for years and years and years. And of course, due to, proper practice, you go out and you keep them honest and you go out to bid. So I guess when this vendor found out that we were going out to bid, they were a little disgruntled in that we weren't respecting the long history relationship, and there was only 2 vendors that answered the bid. One was in Vernon, and their price was higher because they were farther away, and then this other company that we were currently practicing with. Well, since they knew they were going to be the lower bid because there was only 2 of them, they actually increased our price by 7%. So instances like that. Another one, so it's times where there's only a few vendors to perform the task. Another one that he gave me was recycling of their existing asphalt. There was one vendor doing it, and then there became 2 vendors doing it. So they put it out to bid. The vendors know of each other because it's such a small world. They know the specifications per the bid. So if this vendor knows that vendor can't do it, they know they're going to be awarded, and they jack the price. So I thought that was a good idea. And to your point of adding some more discretion in
Flexibility,
there
yeah, I
when
agree.
it's justifiable and appropriate.
So you're going to put something like that in?
Yeah, so I was going to add something that said that department heads can submit documented justification for not going out to bid, and then something along the lines where if I don't approve of it, then the town manager would have the ultimate say.
Isn't it, you can waive that now through the Board of Selectmen, right? As I understand it.
I'm not sure,
Well,
honestly.
it's the Board of Selectmen's policy, so I think that they can adopt a new policy to do that, right? Or is it
Would they have to-
procurement? Because it's the procurement policy, is that right?
Well, would they have to go back and re-adopt the policy, or would they be able to make an exception in the policy? That I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, what was in my mind was that sometimes things are time-sensitive, and
Right.
I'm not thinking so much about, I mean, I don't know what all things you guys bid on, but, you might have, well, I don't know, what's that day called before Thanksgiving when they have everything going on? Well, that's actually not a town event, but let's pretend it was. Like, oh, I discovered that you need such and such for that, and it's, the date is set, you don't have time to go out and do a whole bid and all that stuff. And maybe the Board of Selectmen is not getting together in the next month.
Right.
Because sometimes they skip a week, and it's only every other week. So, I mean, there are times when there's just an
Timeliness.
urgency that makes sense. I mean, I think, it needs to be monitored that there's not a pattern of constantly flouting the rules, but if you
Right.
have a justification.
That may be, I think that's a good idea, but maybe you, to Linda's point, put in a reporting, just as normal when you do it, hey, we didn't follow this procedure, and either
Right.
report to
Yeah.
the Board of Finance or Board of Selectmen.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that the public can be aware if there is a pattern.
Another question I had was sort of on the opposite side, that in long ago history, there have been occasions I've heard about by rumor only, of things getting kind of split to avoid having to comply with. So is there some kind of language you could put in there that says, one job or one function or one item, if you need 1,000 X's, cartridges of toner, I don't know, making it up, you don't go to buy 500 and another 500 in 2 separate
Right.
contracts.
So I think that comes down to actually monitoring the policy. So if you're doing two jobs and 2 separate purchase orders, and you catch that somebody's doing that, I personally feel like they're already out of compliance with the policy, and that they're trying to circumvent, and I think that would be something that would be an issue. I don't know if that needs to be spelled out in here.
Okay, just maybe you could bring it up at the Board of Selectmen, see
Sure.
what they think. Go with whatever they're happy with. Any other questions on any of this? Oh, I did, one other question I had. What happened to the local vendor preference? Is that something that the feds don't allow, or?
No, so the local vendor preference, if you look at the very last bullet point, the E, there was actually an expiration on this.
Oh,
It
okay.
has already expired.
And the Board of Selectmen didn't want to,
Not that I know of. And then I read some notes when this was reviewed before, and they had actually a really good note in there about it limiting the number of vendors that respond to a bid. So with the expiration already noted in there, I thought it appropriate to remove it.
But that is something the Board of Selectmen, if they decide to add it, could do that at a later time.
Right.
okay.
I had a few questions.
Anything else? Do we need to vote on this, or just?
I have some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said anything else? I didn't hear anything.
One thing, it's great that you relied on Bloom Shapiro, who did the analysis of other towns. That was one of my first questions. The second is, I'm assuming that this is in compliance with Connecticut general statutes and reviewed by council, or will be.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
And then, have you done, Burke, a comparison with Board of Ed? Because I would hope that our procurement policies would be similar, because we may want to do joint procurements in some things. Has there been an analysis with the Board of Education on their
We
procurement
have
policies?
not. I did not know that that was past, I don't know what the past practice is. Do we typically review each other's?
I mean, I think that it was just, I think I was asked a question of how, I'm not sure if it was by you, but by others of, what, in the process of sort of surveying what were other towns and what were the boards doing, our policies are very similar. The Board of Selectmen policies look very similar to this. So it almost occurred to me that somebody looked at ours, but I can't say that for.
So it does make sense to me that we should have consistent policies across towns. I would just urge both boards to take a look at that, to get some consistency. And if they aren't, to identify why they aren't. Is there a reason one has adopted a policy that's different or not?
Yeah, I would assume they don't need to be word for word, but as
Right.
long as they're not conflicting.
Precisely.
Because they do have different needs, and they do have different report to, the Department of Education and the state may have very different
Precisely.
requirements, so I wouldn't expect they would be
It
identical.
is worth looking at them to see,
Absolutely,
are they
especially
compatible,
since we-
do they conflict, are we creating a conflict that's insurmountable when it could easily be avoided? It seems, I don't know why we wouldn't. Did you take a look at, I'm assuming Bloom Shapiro looked at GFOA best practices in making their recommendations to you?
Yes, they did, but I actually looked at their state website as well. I mean, their website as well, not their state website.
Okay. And then I noticed under professional services, we have the threshold of going out to RFQ at 50,000. I think Mansfield did 25. And there was some discussion in past years when we started to look at it at the Board of Selectmen, what is the proper amount? And could you give some background as to why you settled on 50 here but 25 in Mansfield?
Sure, so the 50,000 was actually not all over the board when we went out to different towns, but it was anywhere between 25,000, 50,000. Mansfield actually wanted the 50,000. However, the town council at the time, given the issues with the fraud that were going on at the time, were not comfortable with that, and they reduced it to 25,000.
So one of the things I think would be helpful, two things. One, I think it would be useful for the public to know what groups, businesses have $50,000 or more contracts with the town. It would be great if we could see a list of anyone over 50,000, just for the interest of transparency. And then in terms of the lowest bid, it used to go to the Board of Selectmen if we're not selecting the lowest bid. Has that changed in your recommendation?
I believe, I don't know if that's addressed
I
in here.
didn't read that it had to in this policy, but I might have missed it.
Yeah, I had thought that, I saw that crossed out, but I could be wrong.
I think, it makes sense to not always go for the lowest bid.
Correct.
It should
Oh,
be the
Yeah, the only, in the interest.
combination of quality.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we have certainly waived that
Yeah.
when we did council and then other surgeons, but it always was done publicly, so that there would, one, it really protects you and the town manager by doing that, because you've done it publicly and for, I think, to me, if you're not going the lowest bid, I prefer that it be done publicly in some manner. It doesn't have to be through this board, it could be through the Board of Selectmen, that's my preference.
Would you like them to have the final approval as a preference, or would you like it to be a reporting requirement, just like when we go outside of the policies?
So I think elected officials should approve if it's going outside the thing, but that's really a Board of Selectmen call, so I would leave
Yeah.
it to them to.
I'm just making note, yep.
And I would be, you guys can weigh in too, I would be comfortable having it be a reporting thing, and maybe both you and the town manager have to sign off in order to, not, but I'm a believer in not hamstringing the staff, because you have to wait 2 weeks and sometimes 4 weeks to have a Board of Selectmen meeting. I'd rather give you the flexibility to get the work done, and things seem to take way too long to happen as it is. I don't want to slow anything
So
down.
most of these things are contracts for things that we know about. Very few things are emergency. They're based on capital projects or ongoing purchases. So that doesn't happen very often. But the most important thing to me is that it be transparent, whether it's a reporting or
Yeah.
a prior approval.
Okay,
I just think
understood.
it's important that the public understand when we have them, because otherwise you get accusations that you've given it to your buddy or a friend. And if you do it publicly,
Yep.
there's a public justification and a public explanation, and it really protects staff, I think.
Understood.
Any other comments?
Hold on. Oh, no, I think that's all I have.
More, Kevin? Nothing? Okay. All right, you said you didn't need us to vote on this, right?
Correct.
Great, okay. So, moving right along, the audit services request. Speaking of RFPs, here we have a lengthy one.
Yes, we do.
I don't think we want to review every detail of it. You want to summarize it in any way, or?
Sure, I could just say that this is something that we plan on sending out sooner rather than later. This was another item that was discussed at the
Yep.
last Board of Finance meeting. And then in addition, I don't know if you had any questions on the actual request for qualifications, but in addition to that, we are looking for a Board of Finance volunteer to assist with the
Right.
selection of the audit firm.
Should we ask questions first, and then we'll look for a volunteer?
Or defer to Rob if this seems.
Yeah, do you know if Rob wants to do that? Wants to be involved?
He hasn't said either way.
Okay. Did he even know that there was a question? We could nominate Rob in his absence.
I mean, we sent him the packet, and he didn't respond, saying that he wanted to be. But if he's on vacation, I doubt he read
I
it.
can make a
Right.
motion for Rob or his designee.
Right,
Rob can
yeah.
assign whoever is available if they can't make a
That's a
meeting.
good idea.
I second that.
All right, so it's Rob.
Right.
That's what you get for not showing up.
Or his designee.
Yeah, that should be a warning to whoever is next not to come, which is actually me. The only question I had in the way of, if you can summarize, is there anything different that we should be aware of in this contract than what we've been getting in the way of services in past years, or is it pretty much the same?
No, I think it's pretty much the same, and from what I know, there's not anybody that's not satisfied with Bloom
Right,
Shapiro.
correct, yeah.
They do a really good job. They have the governmental focus, which is really important, and I think we'll try to see if we can get other firms to respond that have that governmental focus. But in the end, if we don't have firms with the governmental focus, so the whole point of going out to bid, other than keeping their pricing honest, is to make sure that, we have that second set of eyes on the books that, that's coming in fresh and new, because their set of eyes have been on it for the last 10 years. So if, worst case scenario, we can't get another firm with comparable qualities, we can always request from Bloom Shapiro a change in partner. And that would give us a new partner to oversee our account and look at it with the fresh set of eyes. So we do have that backup in case we don't have the qualified candidates that come from this request for qualifications.
Great. Any other questions?
I do.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're allowed.
One of the things
you're here for.
Mr. Cook was looking at is sort of data analytics, and a lot of the accounting firms now, with our Bloom Shapiro, we can ask them to do stuff and they'll calculate it, but there are now systems that have evolved, which, as part of an accounting proposal, you might get access to, so you don't have to use sort of automated systems for analytics, metrics, and stuff like that. And I think that we should start looking towards not only what services, but what technology they have available to towns to make us more efficient, more transparent, and to analyze data. I know it costs money right now for them to do an analysis when we go to union negotiations, and it seems to me there should be a system out there that someone has where you can plug in the numbers and just do the analysis without having to pay exorbitant fees. We're at the point where I'd be interested in what sort of analytics and what sort of technology they offer as part of the
Definitely
RFP.
add that. Absolutely.
Anything else on that topic? And you don't need us to vote on this, do you? Okay. All right, moving right along to communications. I really appreciated the memo summarizing all of the work that the front office did, and
That was Melissa and Maria.
Yeah,
They did a
yeah.
good job on
it
that.
was very, very helpful, it really was.
We do a lot.
Yeah, it really, I was impressed with how much you already do. It did have two suggestions for just a little bit more that you could do. The sandwich boards at all of the schools is great if you happen to live near a school, but I don't know if they ever were done in the past or not. I seem to remember that they were. Like, I live on the other side of the river, and going to work up 185, I never see anything in town, but there used to be signs that people would put, sandwich signs, on Route 185 or in the island where, and I don't know, DOT doesn't allow it anymore? But there are locations around town that are not town property necessarily, but like at the intersection of Stratton Brook and Bushy Hill, places like that, where people put signs all the time, and you're almost sort of, geared to looking for, well, what's going on now? I just think if you could look for some additional intersections or locations where, that are high-traffic areas, that people might be, and maybe even, at the gateways to the town where we've got those pillars that say, welcome to Simsbury. Just something where people are typically driving by and more likely to see the sandwich signs. And I also wondered about the email list. I know we have an extensive email list that's intended for emergencies, but I wonder if it could be deployed to just send a one-sentence, hey, did you know the budget vote is coming up?
We are using an announcements feature. That's how we get people who e-subscribe to us. That's sort of our email subscription service.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure if I was on that list because of other reasons. So, like, thousands of people get that?
Yeah, it's the one, if you go to our webpage, in the e-subscriber, you can sign up for different, like, Board of Finance packets, Board of Selectmen, but there's also the main news and announcements, which shows up on the main page and also gets pushed to your email. if you
Okay,
sign up for
I
that.
thought there was, in addition, a list for emergency notifications.
So you can do a phone call, that's a reverse 911, which
Right.
we cannot use for budget. But
Right.
there are other lists, like Parks and Rec has 4,000, the Board of Ed probably has 5,000 emails. So there are other lists that
Right.
you haven't into. And I know
Right.
the Board of Ed, when we did joint letters from the first selectman, the Board of Finance, and the Superintendent of Schools, would send to the Board of Ed list, town list, and the library has a list too that has
Right.
thousands of people. So the question is, can you coordinate and get out
Right.
that information and capture more emails by using all the lists that the town has? There are lots of lists, and I don't think we've ever done an inventory of how many. Now, you do run the risk, however, if people subscribe for certain information. If they signed up for Parks and Rec, they may not necessarily want the information on the budget. So that's a question for council as to how you would do
But
that.
one email a year. Yeah.
But there's stringent laws about sending out emails and texts. If
Right.
in the way we have ours set up with your specifically opting in, I think you cannot.
I don't know, that's a question for council, but that's something you'd want to look into.
Yeah.
And it's a strict liability, so you even if you didn't intend.
It's 16,000 an error, so
Yeah.
you want to get that right.
And you don't get, exactly. So per email.
So Burke, how does it work with the Board of Ed email list? Do parents opt into your list?
Yes.
There is an opt-in feature through the school website, I believe, and then for emergency purposes, I think we have the ability to make a call to them. I'm not sure if they can opt out of that or not.
So I'm also wondering, is there a way to approach those lists, and if council says you can't send an email once a year that says, hey, don't forget it's a budget vote, can you send them all an email from your normal source saying, we will offer you this email if you want to just press yes or whatever? some way to get some more access to those people to get a
Well,
reminder.
there may be a way, I know, and that would be up to the Board of Education, but to say, hey, there's all this great information, don't forget to go to the town website, and you can sign up for information on Parks and Rec.
Right.
The town news and announcements, and then people have an option of opting
Right,
in. We
right.
do that with Board of Ed stuff, hey, in the town thing, if there's a special event that's of interest to the town, we'll put that on the town website so people can, and you
Right.
can give people an option of opting in, because they may not know about it. That's another option.
All right. Anything else on that topic?
Yes.
Okay.
So the thing that has driven me crazy for, Moira, how long have we been doing this flyer? I think you and I, 15 years, right? Something like that? The two Pac-Man graphs are not the same, so we're not comparing apples and oranges. I would just be so thrilled if we could find a common language so you could compare the two.
So I didn't understand the two Pac-Man thing? Oh, the pie charts.
Oh,
The pie charts, yes.
Oh, I was like, what's a Pac-Man thing?
Bert knows. But just so that you can compare and sort of see where the money is going. They're not identical apples and oranges. If we could just make it a little bit more compatible, and also, it looks like they're co-equal budgets, and they're not.
Right,
And if there's just some way that we can rethink how and maybe that goes, I think, with OpenGov, we've got a great start there. But there's just some way we can convey the information in a little bit more readable way. There's a lot of stuff, and I know the reason we don't change it very often is because it was approved 15 years ago, and by the time you get to the budget, it gets very chaotic, and you have to do it very quickly, and there's very little turnover. It has to be approved by three boards at that point, so there's no time to make changes. But now is the time to think about it. I happen to know that there's someone in this room who is particularly wonderful at taking complicated things and making it look beautiful. Might be Melissa. And so if we could just take a look at how could we capture some of the data, and, I would check with Bert and, and Matt and the Board of Ed, what do they want to convey? And are we conveying the information that we think is most useful to the public so that they can make informed choices? We
Right.
hear all the time, I don't understand what I'm voting on.
Right.
So is there a way to take some of this and really give some thought as to what is it we think the public wants to know? We put in here, because this happened 15 years ago, and we just haven't changed it. I think it's a good idea to take another look, and especially now with you here as a
Right.
new Director of Finance, you may look and go, guys, what are you thinking? Why is this here and not this? So I just think now is the time to sort of take a look and think about how can we display it in a more readable way, and can we make it comparing apples and apples and apples and oranges so that the public can understand? It is complicated. I don't know that there's a perfect way to explain all this, but to the extent we can think about it, it's an opportunity to communicate.
Yeah, to your point, you look at the year-by-year budget data, and yes, this is factually correct that the Board of Selectmen went up 16% last year and down 7%, but it isn't really the truth. Because that was, we parked money. It wasn't really the budget that the town got to use. So sometimes being absolutely accurate is not really in the interest of helping people understand what's going on.
Without an explanation,
Right.
explaining why that
Yeah.
happened. And there's only so many pieces of paper you can do it on. It's
Right.
not a lot, so how do you convey the information that's most crucial? And I don't know the answer, but I think we can do it better than what we've been doing.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I thought the budget guide was pretty good. And congratulations on the award for excellence in financial reporting.
I'll accept that on behalf of Sean.
You get to be around to take the accolades.
That's all right.
And what did you want to tell us about the annual report, other than here it is?
We just realized we never shared it. We talked about it, whenever it was.
Thank you for sharing now.
So we're now starting to produce the fiscal year 18. We're trying to get on a new schedule so that we're doing it in a more timely manner. So departments are now working on the 18 annual report, so it'll the goal will be to get it out before the end of the calendar year, as opposed to what in the past, and we've been a little bit behind.
And hopefully get it more compatible with the budget process, because what's in here should be what's in the budget book, should be the goals and priority. I mean, it should all be the same thing instead of 800 different. And slowly moving in that direction is great to see.
Well, we might beat Rob's record for the fastest meeting. But
Dubious.
did you have
I
a,
had one
Yep.
update if you were getting ready to adjourn.
I wasn't quite, but go right ahead. No, because I was going
Okay,
to,
so.
We're going to adjourn, so if you've got something to say.
To relay, I know the board is always interested in sort of the update on how enrollment is shaping up. And this summer, registration-wise, has been fairly active. We're still, always having people who are looking to sign up kids as well as leave throughout the school year. We had projected that the enrollment would go down just a bit below 4,000 students for the first time.
that was a decline of
Over
what?
40, about 43 was the projected decline. And while we're not at the 10-1 number yet, we are looking like we could actually have a slight increase.
Oh,
So we're significantly off from the projected decline. And then also the way enrollment in the particular schools have parsed out, we ended up having higher kindergarten enrollment in 3 different schools that necessitated hiring 3 kindergarten teachers. And that's what seems to happen to us as you get those class size issues in particular grades and particular schools, and this year it was kindergarten. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
okay. Actually, what I was going to ask before we adjourned was, pretty much every meeting, the finance director used to give us a finance director's report. So-
Okay.
And Burke usually, every 2 or 3 meetings, gives us a report. So I just wanted to check in with either of you if you had anything you wanted to share about how things are going.
I think things are going well. I'm rolling out my purchase order program, so I'm very excited about that. In addition to the purchasing policies, we have new purchasing procedures so that there is better monitoring and more accurate GL information in a timely manner so that we can take advantage of certain things down the line, which you'll see investing in bonds and not missing out on that money during the year so that we can, with the new purchase orders going into place, we'll have like a day-by-day cash flow that we can come up with. So with that cash flow, we can actually take advantage of, say, releasing $1 million for investment, and say we get a 1% return at a minimum. That's like $10,000 that we're currently missing out on right now that we can try to pursue going forward. So that's one of my main focuses right now. And next week, I am super excited to be full-time and focus on taking care of the audit.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just say, it was very helpful to have the written report. It gave a summary. There was a quarterly report on where we are in terms of expenditures, what was trending, what wasn't, state impacts, the status of grant funding and stuff like that. So I think it would be helpful to have a formal report. And also, I think it's helpful for the public to sort of get an update periodically.
Absolutely.
And I know the
Do that.
Board of Selectmen, we would do that quarterly over there. But it would be the same report, so you didn't have to,
Do it multiple times.
right.
Yeah, I had a question, and now it's just flown out my right ear here, but I know there was something I was going to ask. Oh, one thing I wanted to follow up on that is from when we were going through the whole budget process, and I don't expect you to have an answer now, but maybe next month. There was a request when we were going through the budget process to provide some funding to the Volunteer Ambulance Association. And actually, we didn't fund that. And it was anticipated that staff would be working on sort of an alternative and so I'm just sort of curious where things stand with that, and I don't expect you to answer right now, but if you could give us a
I can get you an update on that.
hint next time.
The plan was to get together over the summer. Scheduling conflicts didn't happen, so we were going to be determining next steps. So it's still a work in progress in terms of where we're going to go next.
Okay, yeah, I just don't want us to be back here in January with the same thing and no progress, so. And I remember my other question, when will the year-end close for last fiscal year be completed?
It's currently in process. Being part-time, unfortunately, I can just get through the day-to-day stuff. So you should have your results at the next meeting in September.
That's early.
Really?
Yeah, we've done it in October and November,
Oh.
so you're doing
Well,
great.
the auditors come out in October, so I'm trying to get it done before then. Okay, let me revise that. You'll have your preliminary numbers in September. There we go. That's better.
Give you some wiggle
Give a
room.
little room there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Anything else from anyone else? All right. May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.